before the end of the call. So if we could get to media by 1:15, that would be awesome.
Sure. So, yay. So this is the Drupal usability meeting for January 22nd, 2019. And we'll cover some layout stuff and some media stuff. Those were the two proposed, if I read all the proposals right. And since Sean is not yet here, let's start with one of the layout ones.
Okay, so the two issues that that I'm talking about are, or that I would like to talk about are, let's see, issue number 2988970, which is making it easier to modify the default layout for an entity type when viewing an entity, and then 2938182, which is designing intuitive affordances for Layout Builder to illustrate which parts of the page are editable in a certain context. So let's see. I'll start with the editing the default layout for an entity type, and I can share my screen. All right, 1, 2, there we go. Okay, so the idea is if you're editing the layout of the page, you have the tab here, and I think the most straightforward thing we can do is provide a box that lets the user know what they're doing, and then provide a link to override if they have the ability to override, or this is the override, and if they have the ability to do that, then we would show this box. Otherwise, they would only ever be editing the default anyways. So in this case, if you went to edit for all recipes, then you would be taken to this screen and it would tell you that you're editing the layout for all and then the name of the content type.
Emily, could you zoom in on the tech? I can't quite make it
Sure.
out with it.
Yeah, let me. Is that better?
Yes, thank you. So you are editing the layout for this recipe, edit for all recipes instead. And then the other one just said you were editing for all recipes. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the only visual difference is that what's in that message. Is that correct?
Right. The only visual difference is I also have an icon there to indicate global versus this is just the location icon. Okay. So we could talk about different ideas for those. That was just, that seemed straightforward.
Yeah, that's helpful to have something that's a quick scan, because we know from usability tests that people just glaze over anything that's in a message and just kind of whatever. And that's helpful too, because using different icons also works for accessibility too. So that's great. Yeah, I guess without testing this with people, it's hard to know if this is sufficient. You know, like other places to kind of indicate this kind of thing, like when you're editing an unpublished node, it's bright fucking red. So it's very obvious that you're doing something on something that's different. We're not doing that here. It's a lot more subtle. And I guess the disadvantage of the subtlety is that you could actually lose a lot of, not lose work, but you could kind of, I mean, you could end up losing work if you do all of it, like 20 minutes worth of putzing in the layout builder and then realize, ah, crap, I just did that for only this one instead of all of them, which is a little frustrating.
Yeah, what happens if you click edit for all? Are you losing your changes, or are your changes transported to all recipes, or what happens?
If you clicked edit for all, I think your changes would still be saved in temp store on the override, unless we wanted to change that behavior. But by default, that is what would happen.
Yeah, it'd probably be hard.
What you want, yeah. Okay, so that's good. So if I do get into that situation where I've made 20 minutes worth of changes on only one and I go cursing myself and my deity of choice, then the way to fix that is I click on edit all recipes instead, and then it will apply my changes to the global template that I just made. So that's actually not bad if that's how it works. Is that how it works, Ted?
No, right now it would stay in Tim Store for your overridden. You would have to cancel for that. And if you clicked edit for all recipes instead, it would just take you to the page. But
okay, so I
think we could write something that would transfer it over if that's what makes sense to everyone.
I don't know if that's what makes sense. I'm just trying to put myself in the headspace of that user. But okay, so they are not applied, but you don't lose them in that. If you go back to, if I can find my way back to how I got in there to edit that one specific node to begin with, then I know that. Is there any difference between the edit buttons to get into this situation in the first place? Because that seems like that would be the most useful place to put it. Like, in other words, if there is like I don't know how I got in here. What's this?
Yeah, so this, if you were on a node, then you clicked layout, that would have taken you to here. And then it would have this that tells you you're editing the layout for this recipe, because everything in these local tasks so far is for the singular item.
Yeah, so I wonder if the label of that tab is the where to put the distinction, or another place to put it. Because if this was this is a terrible label, but say it was this recipes layout was the name of that tab versus all recipes layout is the name of the tab. That would be clear before I even click into here and get into trouble what's about to happen. Those are way too many words, but I'm just saying, like, if we could somehow layout parentheses global or layout parentheses local, something, I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but I feel like that allows me to not get into this situation to begin with.
Okay. Yeah, that is one proposal that's on the issue.
Yeah, people have thoughts, because that also might be a completely bunk idea. But.
I mean, I think I don't know if override means anything to content editors or people who would have this. I mean, often people will have the override permission probably, but not the other one. If we set up the permissions different, if we allow that. I mean, I think having layout override there might be useful. I think when you're editing the global, when you come from the global, it's maybe more obvious because you actually have, like, unless you get to it from here, which means you were already on the editing page and then went to global. The other way to get to the global is like manage display. So you really have to be, in the structure part of the website. So I think that's more obvious.
So the default behavior is any node that I click layout on is gonna edit the local. The only way to make it not do that is to, okay, I'm sorry, I missed that bit.
If you have permissions and if you set up your entity type, if your node types to do it that way.
Yep.
Yeah. So I modeled some of this after behavior I'd seen on systems like Squarespace, where they have a template that you could edit, but in general, it's assumed that you're editing that specific page. And then they sometimes have text that tells you that you could edit the global area, and that's where you would click in and you would end up on a templating page.
I think that is true. Like, I think most users have that expectation that if I'm editing something, I'm talking about this page. And if it all of a sudden starts editing pages I'm not currently looking at, that is bizarre, and we should warn people about that. So I think the behavior is correct. Yeah. Okay.
I have
No, go ahead, Thomas.
I just was wondering if, from the perspective of global pages, is there some way to have a universal identifier or icon of some sort so that people know when they're on global pages versus when they're on local? Because I agree that this page makes sense as a local environment and you're making local changes, but it would be nice if people could visually know and have some trigger that when they went to that page, they knew this was specifically a global page, because that would help me know context a lot easier if I could always see when I'm on global in a universal way.
I think the only indicator they have, because otherwise the two pages look identical, is the message both is different and also has a different icon. So the global one has the globe icon, and the local one has the little location icon.
Yeah,
Right.
and one thing, while the pages look identical here, they probably wouldn't in practice, because on the specific page they would be editing with the appearance of the content that's on that page, which is probably different. Whereas when they're editing the global one,
if you flip, can you flip to the all recipes for a sec? Because like if the all recipes was like lorem ipsum blah blah blah, then that would be an obvious.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say, is that while I have this as my example content, in actuality it would probably be whatever your example content built into the site is, which could be lorem ipsum, or it could be your generic example content that you entered.
So there is some concept somewhere in the layout system, or wherever it is, of a default generic piece of content, and that's what loads through? Okay.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's much better. Okay.
And there's
I
no
clicked edit, and all of a sudden, instead of saying vegetarian oven baked pasta with spinach and ricotta, it said generic sample content, or some, you know, some word there.
Right, or yeah, something that said that this was a generic title. Yeah, that's what would happen.
Yeah, or in the placeholder image, instead of being actual pasta, was like a big X or something. Like that would be obvious.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the mockups just to make that a little more clear, that you would see that switch in content too.
So the other thing we haven't talked about this design is the sort of fading out of the rest of the page.
Yeah, that was, I was going to go over over the next issue.
Okay, great. The other thing I think to comment about this here is, right now in core there's no way to like affect your default content, so an image will always be the generated random image. So it will be, I mean, if people could upload like, this is what I want the image to look like for generic articles, then it might be more confusing. But since we don't give them that ability, it's, I think, more clear that they're on a generic page. And the other thing, we didn't really talk about doing this, but I think Angie, you had mentioned the idea of like taking the work that you have and taking it to the defaults. I think it'd be very difficult because a lot of particular articles wouldn't have all of the or particular recipes. Well, recipes probably.
Yeah, I feel less strongly about that option if there's a stark visual contrast between the default and the local, and there was not in the mockups that we saw, and so that's why I was raising that. I don't actually know that that's a good suggestion. Like, I think that could also be fucking annoying if I'm like, I wanted to start from the global template and it brought over all these other stupid changes. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I was mostly advocating for like, we need to do something visually strong between these two, because right now they look identical except for a very subtle change in a message area that we know people ignore. So as long as there's a much stronger visual change, like the title is completely different and the image is completely different, then I have a lot less concerns about people losing work.
So I had a really quick question about this. On the current screen, we're in an override mode. Is there a way that people will know the difference between a local page that has been overridden versus a page that has not? And behaviorally, if someone updates the default layout, so when you go to the layout for all, oh, I'm sorry, we're looking at the all page. I was thinking of the last one, sorry. All right, so on the page before this, is there a way to tell that you're overriding? And if the main template changes, are there ways to sync those changes back to local pages that have been overridden?
So those are other discussions that we have issues open for, is how to manage the default versus overrides sync.
Okay. I mean, I think the thing related to this issue, though, is we may want to change that, or I guess be able to say you are editing the layout for all recipes except over. I mean, if the functionality that is now, we would have to say except overrides.
Yeah, maybe maybe something like the template for all recipes might be a better way to put that. That's normally what they call it in other systems. We might need to adjust the wording just because we have theme templates.
Yeah. Or layout template or something for all recipes.
Yeah, I think that would make more sense. Okay, so if the content changes between these and considering how we get to them, it sounds like that seems like it could, in general, be a good way to go.
I think so.
One other question. What happens when you finish editing the layout and click Save? I assume that if you've been editing the layout for a particular page and click Save, you go back to that page?
Yep, exactly.
What if you're on that layout and then you use your link to go to the layout for all recipes and make some changes there and click Save? Does the destination parameter get preserved? Do I end up back at the page I was looking at, or do I end up somewhere in the admin UI?
Right now, by default, you would end up in the admin UI.
So what is the expected behavior there?
I think personally, I think if you've done this for all pages, it will give you more context if you end up back in the admin UI where you would have gotten to this from as a site builder. If you're editing the overall layout for recipes, that would now let you know how you would get to that place. It would give you a better idea of where it lives in the site structure. But I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks.
I have another quick question, and I don't want to take time away from Sean. But when you click Save here, is there any reminder that this is for all, like a confirmation? Because this is highly destructive type pattern similar to what we've seen in the past, where we've talked about having confirmations. Or does clicking Save just instantly make the change to all of the layouts for recipes? Or is it not considered a highly destructive change because it's only a single template?
Right now, doesn't give you a confirmation form. I think if we wanted a confirmation form here, which I do see what you're saying, it does obviously is a really big change. We should do it for both this page and manage display without layout builder on, because it would be weird to, I don't know, they're both are the same sort of destruction right here. If I reorder fields or I change formatter on the current site, it's just as destructive as doing it in layout builder.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think it may be a good idea, but maybe we should do it at once, because also if you have people, if you did it with one and not the other, because you turn on layout builder for certain bundles and certain entity types, you may expect that whenever you do that kind of global change for the display, that you're going to have a chance to confirm. Whereas if you only have a chance to confirm in layout builder, but not in manage display, then you might be sort of like giving people the false impression that they will have a second chance to confirm when they actually won't in manage display, which is very similar to what the defaults do for layouts.
That makes sense to me. I want to assume, or I want to confirm an assumption of mine. There is no versioning or undoing these types of changes, right? These are destructive, meaning once you've reorganized the page and saved it, there's no going back. Is that correct?
On default, because if you have revisions on a particular entity for an override, you can go back.
Right, but for this default or for the display, it's going to be global and it's permanent, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, then it would make sense for in both instances to require some sort of confirmation.
Yeah. But it is a whole can of worms because also you don't get confirmation for adding a field, and that immediately, updates all of your forms for that particular type. So
I don't know that we do need the confirmations. Remember the target audience. The target there's only one user usually on any given site that can even get to the manage fields page, and that person also had to set up a database. So I feel less inclined to babysit what they're doing versus this is a screen that potentially hundreds of people will have access to. So I do feel like it's a little bit different.
I mean, right now this is one permission. I mean, we will have more permissions, but right now the permission to do this is like a security risk permission, though.
It is. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That is unexpected. Okay. Huh. But at any rate, the target audience for this screen, regardless of the implementation detail of the permission, the target audience for this screen is a completely different person than the target audience for the managed fields and managed display screens. Like, you are not going to turn a content author loose on your data model. You will potentially turn a marketer loose on this screen, though, because they are the ones who know how it should look for their given campaign. And I feel like, given that, if we only had the confirmation here and not elsewhere, that's a justifiable reason to do it.
Also seems reasonable. I'm worried about running out of time for Sean, but I just felt like this page is global enough and destructive enough. I wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll try and show the other issue really quickly, which was what Tim mentioned about the grayed out background. This was for designating which part of the page is being edited in the layout builder, so you know that you aren't editing the overall site Chrome. And the idea here is that this background, once you click layout, it would put essentially turn this into a modal window by appearance so that you know that you're editing just this layout area.
I like that a lot. What's the non-visual representation of that? Or is there one? Like for accessibility?
There isn't in the design, but we could try and put something into the markup that's read out loud when you click it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not an expert on what we should do. I just know that you should not ever do anything that's only a color change, basically. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that's, but anyway, huge +1 for this because this makes it really clear what it is you're allowed to edit with this tool.
So Emily, were you thinking of like restricting access to the grayed out part? This is similar to an issue we had last week, like so that they have, okay.
Yeah, I think that this should function more like a modal so that you wouldn't be clicking into the other areas.
So that would be another, like you said, Angie, another something that's not color would be restricting their tabbing to this, or yeah, or that, like what Emily was saying, the idea of like if you click outside, you're either notified or has no action or something.
Yeah, we just need to clear it with the accessibility team, basically. But
yeah.
Okay, great. Well, if no one else has other comments on it, then I'll go ahead and let Sean talk about media.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think I have two issues that I could probably use feedback on at the moment. Let me find the links real quick. They are kind of similar. Let me start with the easy one. And it's issue 3019202. I'll put a link in the chat. And it's about renaming the file media type to document. And one of the assumptions we made while creating the new design for the media library was that we need to have clear media type names so people will instinctively know what kind of files they can or can't add to the media library. And since the file media type that we currently have in core supports basically only document-related extensions at the moment, we wanted to rename that to document. Is this clear? Like this? Or should I share my screen maybe to pull up the issue?
Pretty clear to me. So the idea is naming it document so that people target like PDF and doc files there, but not necessarily images, because we want them to choose a different thing for images. Is that right?
Yes, or zip files or whatever.
Yeah.
And this is a bundle label that people could change if they change the extensions.
Correct. I guess, yeah, sorry.
Is there any anticipation of some of the more common file types being supported in a different media type in the near future? Because it definitely makes sense, assuming that there will be things that hit some of the other common things. It just doesn't make a lot of sense if there's no other place to put things where people are shoving them into files today. So people are misusing files as a term, and so making it documents makes sense, but it assumes that there is a place where they could put the things that they're currently putting into files.
Well, currently, out of the box, we only support document-related extensions, so you already have to change the media type to support more extensions than that. And I guess by naming a document, we would probably encourage people to create a separate media type for non-document related files, and which I think is a good idea.
Fair enough.
Okay. That was, yeah, well, if does anyone have other questions maybe? If not, then I will continue with the related one, which is issue number 3019201. I will put the link in the chat as well to this one. And that issue is about splitting up the remote video media type we currently have in core into a separate YouTube and Vimeo media type, because remote video currently only supports YouTube and Vimeo videos. And if you have a media type that's called remote video and you see a link field, you will probably not know what remote video types or providers are supported. And even though this means having an extra media type by default in core, I think having a YouTube media type is a lot clearer for users than having like this generic remote video thing that only accepts YouTube and Vimeo.
Yeah, here I disagree with you, because that's not scalable. Like if you want to support, like let's say you're starting up a YouTube killer clone and you want to support all of the remote video types because you're creating an aggregator of music video or something like that. You're going to end up with 19 different media types, and it's going to completely bloat the interface, versus what seems better to me is when you click on remote video, or maybe before you click on remote video, if it doesn't currently show you what providers are supported, it should do that. Ideally on the link field itself, it says, you know, enter YouTube or Vimeo or And then if I install the Brightcove module, for example, it would add to the list of things. So personally, anyway, I think I would prefer to handle that in a different way. If it's not clear what media types are supported once you click into remote video, we should solve that problem. That definitely sounds like a problem, but I don't think the solution is one tab on the interface per supported media or remote video source. Just because I can name like 12 of them off the top of my head, and we want to keep the number of tabs in the interface as small as possible. Because, you know, we've all tried to pick the right component in the Drupal.org issue dropdown, and it's like, oh my God. So I feel like, and that's also exposing like implementation details to people. It's like, to a content author, you know, they just know the video is hosted somewhere. They don't even necessarily know that these are all different providers. They just know, oh, I got sent a link and I need to put it on a website. You know what I mean? So that's my 2 cents on that. Anybody else have thoughts there?
So, Sean, is this most on concern? Is the most of the concern, is it for people adding, or is it for people like adding new ones, or is it for people finding existing ones?
Well, one of the assumptions we made while designing the new media library is that people most of the time will add new ones instead of reuse existing ones, which is pretty similar to my own experience for some of the larger sites out there, where you have like 40,000 items in your media library, and finding the correct video is a pain already. So when you want to create a new article and you have your content set up somewhere and you know you have this YouTube URL, you will probably go to the YouTube tab or something and just paste the link and be done with it. For reusing existing content, I can see that you will not always know what it is, and it might be more problematic for that. And the reason I think this is a good idea now, because we only support YouTube and Vimeo in core at the moment, and I don't see that growing to a list of 19 different types very soon. And once people start to add contrib modules to support more, they probably have a good idea what works best for their content authors, and it's not a problem for them to create a remote video media type afterwards. I'm just thinking about what would be a good default for people.
But even just in core, you're using 2 tabs for one concept, right?
Well, in my experience, mostly only one of the 2 is used. Like, for example, when I build a new site, that I discussed with the customer, are you going to use YouTube or Vimeo? And then they're going to pick one, which they already use already. And then that's the one I configure.
Historically, my experience has been the opposite of that. I'm aligned with Angie on this. At universities, it was really common to have, not necessarily with the new media stuff, because this is newer than when I last worked with the universities, but back in the day, it was very easy to have 3 or 4 sources for videos or 3 or 4 sources for audio. I think from an inventory perspective, it's really hard on users to have to know where to look for a particular type of thing, because the user doesn't differentiate easily between them. It seems to be a very back-end or site builder distinction to worry about the methodology for storage.
Sean, in the adding of videos, or media in general, are you, like on the node add page, not that we want to emulate that, but you're shown like the add an article, but then there's the description of the person. I think on that page you're shown the description of it, like articles are used for yada yada yada.
Yes.
When you're adding media, are you shown the description of that media, like or like when you get a choice of like add these types, Is the description shown anywhere in there?
When you go to media / add, then you see the list of all the media bundles or media types and their description. But in the media library, we have the tabs, and there we want to, we have limited space in the modal. So we have like the tabs on the left, and when you click one, you get shown the source field for that one. So in this case, if you click remote video, you will see a text field, and you would be expected to post a link in there. And then you just hope it is supported by the system.
So is there any thought to, I mean, it seems like to me, somebody coming and seeing remote video might not, I might not know what that was really, if I wasn't in web development, I think. Has there been any thought to just changing it to be video? I mean, it seems like remote is the default these days. Like local would be something very strange to upload local videos.
Yeah, unfortunately, we support both, and so we have to differentiate, which is unfortunate. Because yeah, my preference would be video, and then there's like a upload field and a link field, and the link field is heavily emphasized. But
if we have to differentiate, but we're not allowing in core and standard profile uploading local videos, are we?
We are.
We are.
Oh, but well, can we see the screen again? But we could differentiate it by saying local video and then just video. I mean, because now we're saying the differentiation is to say remote, which is really, that's the default these days.
Yeah, we could switch those.
So instead of remote video and video, you want to have video and local video.
Yeah, because I think local is the thing that really needs to be called out, because I don't think that's the more, I mean, I don't know. I'm not from personal experience, just guessing that would be the less common thing.
The only time that's common is in a situation where like you're uploading off a phone or something like that, you know, like a bunch of pictures and a bunch of videos and stuff. But I agree with you that in general, I think that change might be really gnarly to make at this point because we've shipped a release with them called that way. So if we swap them, we'd have to write an upgrade path.
Oh, wow.
I think we could add the word local to video, but I think the machine names anyway, switching those would be problematic, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean.
Well, we don't necessarily have to do an upgrade path. I think messing with existing sites and their media types is problematic anyway. So if we're going to change the standard profile, then we probably should do it only for new sites. But that's maybe a separate issue. And I think the same discussion could be made like for images, for example. Once you start adding Instagram, well, images are mostly local, but still, if you have local video, then you probably need local image and local audio to be consistent as well.
I think I'm remembering this now, and I think that's why we went down this road of just using the word when we mean from your computer and then specifying when we mean not from your computer.
Yeah, so I think,
however, this is it is off topic from your original question, which was whether or not we should leave these things lumped under one tab, regardless of what it's called, or if we should pull each media provider into a separate tab.
Well, it's actually, should we split up remote video in YouTube and Vimeo? Because if you start adding more media sources from Contrib, then you probably know what you're doing anyway. So what I'm concerned about is that remote video for most people trying out Drupal or just installing a new site is too vague. And having a YouTube media type and a Vimeo media type might be a lot clearer for.
I guess I'd feel better about that if we had actual evidence that that was true.
And it's just making the argument that we need to more clearly indicate once you're at the remote video screen that it accepts YouTube and Vimeo. Like the issue isn't the terminology in the tab. The issue is when you're looking at what you can do, verifying it, because if it says video on it, or remote video and people click on it, they're going to know what it does. And if it's not clearly indicated, then that's a labeling or an issue for that screen. I have really strong reservations about splitting these specific branded things up when we wouldn't do it necessarily or want to do it for audio, because there's SoundCloud and there's other audio providers, etc. I think it's a better pattern to have people put the remote videos in one place, regardless of what we call them. And then we just indicate clearly when you're on the screen what file types are accepted, the same way we do for documentation, for instance, because you don't split PDFs into their own tab, even though people know PDFs and they may not know docx.
Fair
something?
enough. Yeah, sure.
So consider the use case of the site builder who just wants to use Vimeo. So under the current system, that site builder goes, and I'm showing the screen now, to edit the media type called remote video and changes the name from remote video to Vimeo. And then edits the description, removing YouTube, and saves. Now, under the proposed change, there would be, out of the box, YouTube and Vimeo, two different things, and then this hypothetical site builder would have to scroll to the bottom and hit delete and get the ugly warning message, are you sure you want to do this, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of prefer the first workflow where I go to the edit screen and change the label and the description. And then when adding media, the label and description will be updated here.
Well, Sean, wouldn't you additionally have to change where, I mean, besides just the label, wouldn't you have to change like what's accepted, or just the allowed providers, I guess?
Yeah, there's this allowed providers checkbox thingy.
Okay, so I uncheck YouTube there. Save.
Yeah. So you have to change these three things to make it work. And if your goal is really to not support YouTube, then deleting YouTube does sound a little bit easier to me. But that's maybe I'm just a little bit concerned about remote video being a vague term. And we already talked about maybe just call it YouTube/Vimeo or something, which is also not a really good option to me. So if anybody has other ideas, or maybe if you're saying remote video is not really a vague term and people will understand that, that's also acceptable to me.
Yeah, the easiest thing to do under remote video would be make the description say that. So like a remotely hosted video such as YouTube/Vimeo, you know. Whether people read it or not, I don't know. Do those descriptions show up in the tabs in the interface?
Currently on media/ad it does, but in the media library we don't have the room, I guess.
Right.
So you need to click remote video and then figure out somehow what it does or doesn't support. So I have this Daily Motion URL. Does it support that or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the idea of just changing the label, like leaving the machine name as remote video and saying the label is, I don't know, YouTube or Vimeo video. Because it's descriptive of what it really is, and obviously people can change it if they want to add like tons of different providers. They're going to want to change it to a more generic term.
If you want to add a provider, you have to edit the remote video media type anyway.
Yeah. So if Core shipped with like an actual label for one bundle that was YouTube, Vimeo, video or something, then you don't have to split it into different content types just for that, or just different bundles just for that case. But also, it's just a label so people could change it later. And I think if they're adding providers, then at that point, they should understand the concept of, okay, this label doesn't match anymore.
I think, yeah, well, that could work to me, I guess, because it immediately is clear that what remote video is. So seeing YouTube/Vimeo, and I have this link, and I'll be like, ah, yes, there it needs to go. I'm not sure if everybody agrees with that.
Sorry, what was the proposal?
To call the media type YouTube/Vimeo or something.
But keep the machine name as remote video, correct?
Yes.
It's just, yeah, I guess it's just kind of weird because, like, would you do the same thing for SoundCloud/Supersound/Sound.com/ you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know about that.
Well, I was trying out WordPress, and it has this URL field where it says, hey, add your external video. And then I posted in a Vimeo link, and it didn't work. And I was like, what?
Yeah, like I said, the link field itself definitely needs to tell you what sources are allowed. That is a problem if it doesn't. But the label of this tab, short of actual data saying that people find this confusing, is strange to me, I guess.
There could be a lot of types, or a lot of providers, sorry. So once you start adding providers, it's getting harder and harder to.
We could just have a link, though, in the description that says, for a list of supported providers, click link, you know, and then that pops up in a, kind of like the input filtered help text.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that could help, too. And then we'd have some page somewhere that generates the list.
Well, I like the idea that we compare this a bit to like documents, because of course it would be insane to have a separate media type for PDFs and for docx files and for PowerPoint presentations or whatever. So in that regard, you convinced me that having one media type is probably the best solution. And then I guess we're down to naming things, which is always the hardest problem, I guess. I'm not really sure yet on what to do next with this issue. At least I can add a comment that the general feeling is that we need to keep a single media type for all remote videos, and that we have to take another look at naming these things. Is that a correct summary?
Yes.
Okay. Then, yeah, we'll probably not figure this out right now. So I'll have to think about this a bit more for myself, I guess. For me, these were the two issues that I could probably use the most immediate UX feedback on. In the coming weeks, I'll probably have more when patches start getting in a more serious state. So if anybody else has something, then we still have like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think Dad had more stuff.
Sure. Yep. Okay.
Thanks, by the way.
Thank you.
So, screen are we on? Okay, so this is a, let me find the issue, alternate UI. UI is, chat, where did I hide the chat? So the issue number is 129333055. And it sort of, it started, or I guess it is an accessibility issue. And Andrew had suggested, Andrew McPherson had suggested doing a totally different table-based UI for Layout Builder. And this would be like at a separate URL. And this was kind of, I think he is maybe not so, it was kind of like a last dish effort because we had some accessibility problems in the Layout Builder, which we solved. We have good solutions for some of them. And we have good ideas, I think, for most of them. So I think, let me just make sure, I don't want to quote Andrew if it's not correct. I think he has got some, yeah, he was interested in this idea of having this actually integrated into the Layout Builder instead of a separate UI. But so if we go to Manage Display, Manage Layout, it has a new link up here called Layout Overview. And this would show you all of your sections, all of your current sections. These aren't labeled. The issue is not too far along right now, but it would have your sections and then the region. So this one only has one. So let me actually add another section so you can see what it looks like. Add a 2-column section. So now the Layout Overview would have your 1-column section, and has remove section, and then it has the region, which we could label region content, but we haven't done that yet. And it has the blocks within that region, which has your configure, remove, and then it has here has a 2-column section down at the bottom with the first region and the second region. And then you can add a section anywhere in between here. And the idea here is that I think for some people this would be easier to interact with than this here. I think non-sighted users would be one audience that this might be easier to interact with. And I think people maybe who use a mouse who use keyboard navigation rather than a mouse, this might also be easier to interact with because it's clear here, like you can easily get to the operations and configure them, get to your different actions. So one variation I had when I first started this was actually to have like reordering of the blocks here. But we have a separate issue that I think I presented to this group that would add a move link to all the contextual links, and you'd have a form that goes up on the side and allows you to move. So when that issue gets committed, we would have a move one here, which would allow you to move any individual block within its current region or to another region within the section, within different sections. So yeah, I haven't really gotten too far on this idea. The alternate to this approach would be to have a totally different page that kind of looks like blocks and layouts, or sorry, block layout page, which would have all the regions and sections, but then you would be totally separate from the preview. Whereas this one, we have a table-based approach, but you also can see the preview to your left here. So if I was to configure this and I wanted to actually add a label or have the label show up, and I update it, I can see right here that, oh, the label just showed up here, image. Actually, there's a bug here. It's picking up the field label and not the label I put out. But the idea is you would see immediately the changes here. And if I deleted this one, then I immediately would see on the left, oh, the image has been deleted, but allows me to interact with a more sort of I think one of Andrew's big concerns was that our layout builder UI is very novel, meaning, you know, it's not something that we've done before, and it's actually not, it maybe is different from a lot of other patterns in UIs elsewhere. So having something that is more sort of standard for accessibility purposes might be better as a fallback. So any thoughts?
I really like this. You know, as someone who tries to use the keyboard and tab through things a lot, I like it. And also, I like not having to scroll to see everything.
That's true, yeah.
I think this is a great option.
I mean, you still might have to scroll if it got more complicated over here.
Yeah, but if I have to scroll in the summary view, then I have to scroll on steroids in the preview view.
Yeah, and you're less likely to have to scroll to see everything. The other thing that this adds that you don't get here in the preview, which we may add ability to have it somehow, is you actually see, you know, what these are coming from as far as machine names, which we show on blocks and block layout page. And that could be useful if you have, say, 2 text fields here, which would, especially in the defaults where you have generated content, if you had 2 text fields, they might actually look the same if you're not showing the label. Whereas over here, you would see, oh, I have the body field, and then I have, I don't know, the short description or the byline field or whatever. So showing that might be useful for maybe all users, not just for people who want to navigate with the keyboard.
I kind of think I'd like to see the machine name only on hover as what a title attribute of the link, or maybe a little info button. I don't want to see the machine name all the time, but I certainly do want to have access to it.
Yeah, the thing I was wondering about that is if we add an info for each field, then we're increasing the tabs to, like, we're doubling the tabs for blocks, which maybe is not a big deal, because each one would have to be tabbable. The other thing I thought about, I don't know if we could easily do this, is if we had configure, remove, and info for any of our, we might have something here that says info, which might just open up a little section here that tells you. The other thing we're thinking about doing related to that is on the main page to have or the main preview over here is to have a checkbox that says basically turn off preview, which would show you just the labels and the machine names. Which we could have a global here that, you know, instead of for each block, we could have something to say when you're tabbing through, just one link up at the top that says show block information or something like that, that would immediately just show all of them. So for most users who it might not mean that much to, you don't show it, but you have the option within here to just make one click and then you see them all.
If it was a title attribute, then it wouldn't affect the tabbing, and I think that would still be accessible.
Oh, because when you tab through on the type, oh, I'm not sure if you tab to the, right now, like you only tab, I think there's some problem with I think you only tab to the links over here on the right. So, oh, I guess we could announce it when you get to these operation links. Yeah, so I'll have to look into that. But yeah, I see what you mean about not having it there all the time. So if we could find a accessible way to show it, or to have it available to be seen, but not by default, I'll look into that. So nobody thinks it's a horrible idea to have this over on the right, or it wouldn't always be on the right. You'd have to hit layout overview. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
All right. So I guess we ran out of time either way.
If I could ask one last question. We have this issue where we are working on the new designs for the media library, and we have a list of assumptions there. I think we presented that already a couple of weeks ago. And it would be really helpful if people could comment on the list of assumptions and the designs with their concerns or +1s or whatever. I will post a link in the chat. It's issue 3019150.
Can you also post it again in Slack?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, we should have it somehow here for the recording.
Yeah, posting it in Slack now as well. Thank you.
So that one is this: update, improve mockups and designs for the media library. This one.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. So we ran out of time. Let's continue next week.
Thanks everybody for the feedback.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.